Hey everybody, Kevin Rose here. Welcome back to another episode of Block Zero. This is the show where we talk all things cryptocurrency. Before we get started with this awesome episode, I want to tell you about Cointracking. It is the place, the site that I use, the product that I use to track all of my trades. And you might not think you need this, and I didn't think so initially either, but then I realized I'm going to have to pay taxes on this stuff at some point, and I'm using all these kind of crazy, somewhat shady, weird exchanges that may or may not have APIs. And I just need a place that tracks all my gains and losses and puts it into one nice report for me to view. And I would say that Cointracking is probably the best product that I've found to do this. Now, there are a lot of different kind of portfolio management products and apps that are beautiful and they work quite well. And I've tweeted about a bunch of them, but I would say this is the one for the kind of more hardcore trader that cares about things like taxes. So anyway, check it out. It's completely free. If you don't like it, don't buy it. You can sign up without even paying for it or sending them any Bitcoin or anything. You can do that by visiting podcast.kevinrose.com/cointracking. So podcast.kevinrose.com/cointracking. That'll take you to my link and it helps fund the show. So thank you for checking that out and let me know what you think. So today's show is pretty awesome. We have the co-founder of Ripple and the founder of Stellar, Jed McCaleb. Jed, I first met here when I invested in Ripple when I was at Google Ventures quite a few years ago, and he was at Ripple at the time. He later broke off, left there, and created Stellar, which is in many ways it's very similar to Ripple, but I would consider it almost like a more, if you think of Ripple as kind of the commercial Microsoft of the payment settlements world, then you would think of Stellar as the more open source nonprofit. And he's done a lot of great work here and stuck with this project for quite some time. He created Stellar back in 2014. And now it is massive. It's been blowing up. People are doing their ICOs on it, which is crazy. And it is, at the time of this recording, it is ranked number 6 in terms of market cap. And that comes in at $8.1 billion. So he's the 6th most popular, well, not popular, but highest market cap coin out there. And he's got some pretty cool plans and a different take on what it means to form consensus and how money changes hands. And it's not your traditional kind of standard blockchain technology that, let's say, like a Bitcoin or even an Ethereum uses. It's quite different. So we get into all of that. I hope you enjoy this episode. And as always, the number one thing you can do to help us out is to go and rate the show. After you get done listening, head on over to iTunes or Google Play and give us a 5-star review. That would be massive. It'll get better guests on the show and get us recommended to more people. So thank you so much. And here is Jed McCaleb. I'd love to start at the very beginning because I know you're like an old school, like gangster in this space. When did you first hear about cryptocurrency for the very, very first time?
So there was a Slashdot article in 2010. It's funny that people were still reading Slashdot then, but the project I was working on before was kind of winding down, and I was just kind of looking around for what else was out there, so I just like randomly browsed Slashdot for the first time in years. And there's this article about Bitcoin, and I read about it and got super excited. It was pretty immediately, I was like, this is amazing. Because before I didn't think that it was possible to solve this problem.
So you had thought about the problem prior to this?
Only kind of just vaguely in passing. I'd be like, oh, it'd be cool if there was some sort of money that no one had, that wasn't centrally controlled, or but I just didn't think it was actually possible.
And so was that the actual, was that linking to the white paper, like the PDF at the time? How far along was the project at this point?
So I don't remember. I guess it probably linked to the white paper and Bitcoin Talk. So I think I looked at it before the Slashdot article. Bitcoin Talk had 200 people on it, I think. After the Slashdot article, it had like 2,000. So there was like a big crop of people that came in that first wave, and then just started building stuff. And
were you like mining right away? You're like, okay, I'm in. I'm going to go give this a shot.
No, I never mined. I don't know. I wanted to start building stuff on it, and so like as like something, a way to like start learning the system. Basically, I built that exchange, Mt. Gox.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how did the Mt. Gox thing? Because I know this has been obviously people have covered this quite a bit over the years. But the 30-second version, like it was a trading card platform initially.
Well, it was that years ago before I learned about Bitcoin.
Okay.
And so basically I just used the domain name for the Bitcoin version. Right?
I see.
It wasn't the code at all. It was just the domain. Yeah.
Okay, so you made that exchange, and that was like the first real exchange. How were people trading? They were just sending them to each other for fun.
Well, there was stuff on the forum, like people would post on the forum, and there was some other exchange, but I think you had to actually coordinate with the person. It was more like local Bitcoin style, where you'd like post, "Hey, I want to sell these things," and someone would
meet up in person. And
yeah, I mean they would do it online, but it was more ad hoc rather than like a central exchange kind of
right.
thing. Yeah.
So like I'll PayPal you, and you send me some coins.
Basically, yeah.
Crazy. So you were in it at the very early days, and then later broke off to go. I mean, the whole Mt. Gox thing happened, which was a whole chaotic, crazy time. And then you left, and then what did you start after that?
I think Bitcoin's an awesome idea, but one of the things that's always kind of bothered me about it is this mining process, because it's, I think it's pretty wasteful, and I was hoping that there would be a more efficient way to solve the problem. So I started thinking about it, came up with this idea that kind of led to what is Ripple today. And yeah, so I ran that for a little bit. There's a lot of drama there too as well. But
I think that's when we first met. Actually, I came into the Ripple office there because I invested from the Google Ventures side, and you left shortly thereafter, I think.
Yep.
And so, what were you trying to solve with Ripple? What was your dream and kind of writing the code behind that?
So, I mean, originally it was basically here's a better or like a different way to do this like decentralized money thing, right? And then kind of as we were making the project, we realized that because we were solving the consensus in a different way, you could do lots of other things, right? You could put any kind of asset into the network, things like this, right? And so then it kind of became a little bit bigger than the original vision. Basically, after Ripple, I went on to make Stellar, and the vision there is basically internet level protocol for payments, right? So we want to like connect all the different financial institutions and payment networks together. So money moves a lot more like email does. Mm-hmm. And kind of the thought is that you need to connect not only just the large banks, but you need to connect like all the different financial institutions, right? Because it can't be this thing. Like one of the cool things about having this decentralized ledger is that you can have everybody participate kind of in the same network rather than have gatekeepers. So it's like a much more open system, like much more similar to the internet. So,
and how does this differ from, say, because Ripple, they come out there and they say we're trying to do a similar thing, right?
Yeah.
What was your take when you left there and said, okay, I have a different vision for how this is going to play out? What's the difference technically between the two systems?
I mean, I didn't start Stellar till a year after I left Ripple but basically, today the code is completely different. So technically there's lots of differences, but kind of at a philosophical level, like we set up SDF as a nonprofit because, like the internet, I think it needs to be open and neutral as possible. If you imagine the internet created by a for-profit company, it just would be a very different world, right? I don't think it really would have worked. And the same is true here, right? It needs, like, people need to think that this thing isn't controlled by a central entity and, that they won't kind of like pivot or change their business model, things like that. So I think the governance is actually a huge, important piece, which I don't think that we had gotten right with Ripple. And then also just kind of the approach to how you get this thing fully adopted. I think we're very much more bottom up. Like, I think it's going to be a long time before big banks actually adopt this kind of stuff. I mean, they'll all do pilots on it all day and like explore it. But
lots of pilots every week. There's a new pilot.
There's always pilots. But going from pilot into production is like a whole nother thing. And the banks themselves will tell you that, hey, it's just years and years before we'll ever do this. And I don't think they ever will until they see it working somewhere else in the world. They're just too risk adverse, and maybe rightfully so, but like they're just never going to be, incumbents are never going to be the first movers here, right?
Sure.
So we don't focus on banks very much at all. We mainly focus on like remittance companies and other money transfer companies, right? So they're basically they essentially have one line of business, which is move money from country A to country B. And for them, a network like Stellar is like they can immediately see the benefit of it. It makes things faster, cheaper, more interoperable. Like all these things are much better for them. So.
Can you explain to me how the network actually functions? Because, with proof of work or with miners in general, it's pretty, I think the average consumer thinks, okay, I get it. Somebody's running a rig at their house. This is why it's decentralized, even though you could argue it's a little bit more centralized than that, given some of the big players. But how does your network function? Who's running the nodes? How is consensus formed?
in Stellar, we have a different consensus model, Stellar Consensus Protocol. It was created by Professor David Mazeris of Stanford. So he basically took sabbatical from Stanford and came and worked on it with us for like a year.
What year was this?
This was in, it must have been like 2014, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
2014. And so basically the way it works is every node or server in the network chooses a list of other nodes out there in the network that it wants to listen to. And then essentially what this means is you can pick the people that you think are important, right? And then what happens is, so you say like, hey, I'll agree to this as long as, 5 of these 7 other people also agree to it. And then they're saying they'll agree to it if, 10 of these other 12 people agree to it or whatever. And basically what you can show is what David's paper shows is that you can form this transitive quorum over the whole network. And you can show that the whole network will converge to the same value as long as there's sufficient degree of overlap between these different nodes. And you can kind of think of it like a Facebook friends graph or something like that. Like, everybody doesn't have to have the same set of friends, but a lot of people have overlap in friends, right? And you can kind of draw this graph, and as long as there's an overlap, you can cover the whole network, right? Mm-hmm. The beauty is it has like this flexible trust thing. So like if somebody starts misbehaving or is like compromised or is cheating or what have you, you can just drop them from your validator list, and it's very simple to do.
So you're agreeing on who the good solid actors are in the space. You're saying these are the people that I trust, and then you're looking for overlap.
Yeah, and you don't really have to trust them. You just have to trust that they won't collude with each other, right? You have to believe that they're separate parties, right? That's kind of the level of trust, right? So it's a little bit weaker than just having to believe that they're honest necessarily. And so some of the benefits are obviously it's requires way less resources because it's just message passing. And because, like, for instance, if you want to do, like, the thing is proof of work really won't work for what we're trying to do with Stellar, right? So in Stellar, there's other assets. There's dollars and euros and all these kind of things. And you can imagine, like, the underlying cryptocurrency asset. We also have something equivalent to the Bitcoin called Lumen. If that thing is, say, worth $1 million, like, say its market cap is $1 billion, but there's $1 trillion worth of dollars and euros in the network. Proof of work only takes into account the native asset. It doesn't take into account these like tokenized assets, right? So then it could actually be worth it while for someone to do the 51% attack, even though it's expensive in the like the native currency terms, but it's not because they're making $1 trillion in the token. Right?
I had never considered that because that's actually a problem that Ethereum will have, right? Because if the tokens eventually become more valuable than the underlying network, then it does make sense.
Yeah. And then the other kind of beauty is that because these tokens, the way that the tokens exist in the Stellar world, it's not just dollars, it's dollars backed by a particular institution. So it's like Wells Fargo dollars or Chase Bank dollars, something like that. And then that means that institution could be running a validator and say, here are the nodes out there that I'm listening to or that I trust. And as long as these people say that the dollar has moved, then I also agree that the dollar has moved, right? And so then there can never be a network split or something like that. Because you can imagine if this token exists, like if Chase Bank had a dollar in the Ethereum world, and then now there's Ethereum and Ethereum Classic, now their dollar exists in both worlds. And which one are they redeeming? It's this big mess. Are they obligated to both? Like that can't happen if you actually have a fiat token, right?
So I didn't know that. So if Ethereum forks again, do the tokens also fork as well?
Yeah.
Oh, they do as well. Crazy. So that's really confusing.
Yeah. So
I can see how that would be an issue. So how do you know if someone has the underlying asset that they say that they have? Does that matter? How do you know that Wells Fargo, if they have $1 billion in USD on the exchange, how do you verify that?
I mean, how do you verify it today? I mean, they don't have the underlying assets today, right? So like, you basically, that's who the institutions are that are backing these assets is important, right? Like you would rather have a Chase Bank dollar than a Mt. Gox dollar, right? So like
right.
But it's the same that's true in the world today. Like when you use PayPal, you don't have a dollar, you have a PayPal dollar, right?
Right.
And like, how do you know PayPal actually has a dollar? Kind of just doesn't matter unless there's a bank run, right?
Yeah, I was just wondering how we avoid getting into another Tether-like situation where...
I mean, I think you use institutions that are actually licensed and regulated, that have real bank accounts, things like that, like Tether's.
Yeah, you just don't know. I guess we might know by the time this podcast comes out, but at this point in time, we don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
But there could potentially be something, but who knows? The one thing that I will give you a lot of credit for is that a lot of these projects over the last like 3 or 4 years, they kind of just died off because there was this like 3-year like drought and there wasn't a whole lot of anything. And you've been hard at work on like continuing to improve, and now there's this big resurgence in popularity around your project. What do you attribute that to? Like, why was there this massive jump over the last couple months?
I don't know, but yeah, there was a very long drought. It was pretty tough there for a couple of years. But yeah, now things have really picked up. I think, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea what's driving it.
Is it shocking to you as it was to me? Like, did you wake up one morning and look at your phone and were like, oh my God?
Yeah, basically it was like, all of a sudden, lumens went up 10x like in the span of a week, and we're like, oh wow, it's a different world now. And then it happened again like a few months later, and then so it's just it's pretty game changing for us.
That must just open up a ton of doors for you in terms of, do you see different amounts of like inbound? Like you did a partnership, or you're working on a partnership with IBM now. I guess you're seeing more of that. The more you gain in popularity, the more people are reaching out.
Yeah, I mean, well, the cool thing, the IBM partnership was actually in the works before the price went up so much. But other than that, there's just obviously like a ton more inbound stuff. I mean, a lot of it is nonsense, but I mean, definitely more like legitimate partners are reaching out to us. So there's I think 2018 is going to be pretty huge for us.
Can you tell me about the IBM partnership and is that the exchange that you're working on?
No, so the IBM thing is, like I said, like we don't spend much time focusing on large banks. So our IBM partnership is pretty perfect for us because they do, right? And they have relationships with pretty much every bank on the planet. They basically need some cross-border payment solution for these banks. So they're just working with them to integrate Stellar, essentially, right? So they're trying to bring a consortium of these banks together, and not just banks, but also central banks. So there's a lot of countries around the world that are like looking to tokenize their fiat, right? Mm-hmm. Which I think that kind of serves as the ultimate anchor. An anchor in us is like who's actually issuing the token onto the network, that's kind of the best one, right? If you can actually have the central bank doing it, because then there's the counterparty is the country, which is kind of what you want for fiat, right?
So if they're tokenizing their fiat, and let's just say Switzerland, one of the central banks, decides to do this, are they doing that through a private blockchain on using Stellar, or is that just how would that work?
I mean, none of it has happened yet, but I mean, the countries that have been talked to are they want to use the public chain because that's the advantage of it, right? So I think there's been a kind of a shift away from this private blockchain idea, which was in vogue like a couple years ago, because it really misses out on kind of the whole point of what a blockchain is. Like if you're going to have a private blockchain, just have a database. Like there's very little point in go, because there is definitely a cost to decentralization. And if you don't need the decentralization, just don't have it. Right. So basically the ones that we've been talking to and the ones that are interested they're thinking about it on the public network because they want their currency to be able to interact with other countries' currencies and other, institutions out there in the world. So
how far back does that go though? Does that go all the way to the consumer account level? Because I worry that, for me as an individual consumer, I would think like, I don't want my funds, my balances, unless there's some type of privacy built in. Right. Like how do you handle that?
So, I mean, usually in the Stellar model, and this is true of even the remittance companies that we're working with, the customer doesn't have a Stellar account. So they just have an account with the remittance company. It'd be like you have a PayPal account, and then when PayPal wants to send to like WePay or something like that, at that point it would go over the Stellar network. So it's just tied. You can see money is moving from the PayPal wallet to the WePay wallet, but you don't know who's actual doing that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when I was saying kind of like more private for the internal stuff, like the privacy related stuff, and then external would be going over your network.
Yeah, that's the model. And I think that's what makes sense because you don't need everything to be on the public chain if it's within like one private network. I mean, the beauty of Stellar is it connects these networks. It doesn't have to be every transaction can't be on the Stellar network, right? So you just want the ones that are bridging across the networks in Stellar.
How do you ensure that your network is fully decentralized? We talked about it a little bit earlier, but how do you actually get and incentivize more people to participate so that, it's not just 100 or 1,000, but it's actually, hundreds of thousands or millions of people in the network to have it fully decentralized?
So unlike Bitcoin, it's like much lighter weight to run a Stellar node. It's more like running a mail server or a DNS server or something like that, right? And I don't think we'll ever have like millions of Stellar validators in the world or anything like that. But, if we have like 1,000, I think that that's pretty good. I mean, I think what you want to maintain is sort of the optionality, like basically like if something starts to go wrong that people can route around it. Like it's easy to spin up your own node, even if you're not running one now. Like, so, it's sort of a check on what could go wrong, right? It's the same way with like open source projects. Yes, like, Linux is there's one person that has like commit access on the Linux master, right? And that's fine because at any point, if that goes wrong, someone can just fork the code and start their own, right? So there's like a check on that power, and it's the same is true of this, where it's like it's fine that there's like a more limited number of nodes because you know that you can set up your own, or other people can set up their own if stuff starts to go wrong.
And can you talk to me about where the data is actually stored, kind of what structure that looks like? Like when I think about it, a lot of this makes sense. Like if you're PayPal and you want to move money to another node, you could just say, I trust this other node, right? And then that connection happens. But where does that all reconcile to? Like where is that stored in the ledger? Who's hosting that ledger?
Yeah, so all the validators, the nodes that are validating transactions, they have a complete copy of the state of the world. So there's a database that essentially shows, here's this account and here's its balance in these different currencies. And then when somebody sends a transaction, it's essentially like an update or an insert to that database, right? And then it just changes.
That makes sense. So what about the potential attack? So if I created, let's say there's 1,000 nodes right now, and I go and I spin up 2,000 nodes.
Yeah.
Why can't I just go in and insert my own and take control of everything?
Well, because that's the beauty of it. Because each of the existing 1,000 nodes, they've already specified who they're listening to, right? And you're not listening to random people, so they're not going to. If these 2,000 nodes come on and are saying another thing, they're just ignoring you.
I see. So I can write anything I want to my own blockchain and on my 2,000 nodes, but no one else is going to pay attention.
Right.
Okay. So the writes still happen, but it's just myself.
Right. You basically set up a different network.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool. So people are doing ICOs on your platform now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Stellar is like a pretty perfect platform to issue tokens of other things on it, right? That's what it's built to do, is like hold other kinds of assets and tokens. So I think it's a pretty natural thing for people to do. I mean, obviously, like a lot of ICOs out there in the world are dubious. So, we're trying to, as much as we can, like obviously we can't control it, but like we just try to encourage the good ones to build onto Stellar. Yeah, I mean, the whole ICO thing is pretty crazy. Well, I'm curious how it's going to shake out in the next year or so.
Yeah, the crackdowns that we're starting to see, some of them actually make sense. Like a lot of it seems like they're scam projects. And
for sure. Like I mean, it seems like they're definitely going after the ones that are super egregious first, which makes sense. We'll see how far they go, hopefully. Because the thing is, like, although it doesn't make sense that you can just put up a white paper and raise $100 million. I think this ICO idea has a lot of merit. I think it's gone too far, but the fact that you can raise money from people all over the world is pretty awesome, because like in the traditional way, I mean, being a VC, like if you're not in Silicon Valley, it's like pretty hard. It's much harder to raise money.
Oh,
definitely if you're in like Indonesia or something like that, it's like you get screwed, right? And the same is true if you want to invest in things and you're in Kansas, like you don't have any deal flow. Like it's not the same as being here. So this just kind of levels the whole playing field and like, democratizes access to all this stuff, which I think is great. And it benefits both the people raising money and the investors. I think it's a pretty good innovation once it gets reined in a little bit and like meets reality a little more.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Now, if people go and they create a token, is it considered a token, or is it considered its own kind of currency, or are those kind of one and the same really on the Stellar network? Yeah,
there's no real distinction in the Stellar world. It's just, it's basically, you either have like a dollar token or a whatever, your ICO token or whatever. It's treated the same.
And how does one, like, I'm very familiar with like how you would do this. I've yet to participate in an ICO on Stellar. So I'm curious, like, on the Ethereum side of things, you follow the contract, you put in the decimal places, you put in the symbol, and then like, boom, they automatically show up in my wallet. How does that work on your side of the house?
So, I mean, it's really straightforward. You mean for someone that wants to issue one?
Yeah, they issue a new one and I want to buy into it. Like, how does that function?
It's really straightforward because it's like a built-in primitive to the network. So, basically, you as someone who wants to hold these new tokens, you just trust the issuer. You say like, "Hey, I'm willing to hold these tokens," and at that point, you pay them for the tokens, however that's done, and then they just send them to you, and then now they show up in your wallet, right? So, in the database, it'll show your account and then like how much of this token that you own.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, how about cross-blockchain interoperability between different currencies. Like how, if you were to go and allow or want to purchase something off of your own blockchain onto another blockchain, does Stellar support that in any way?
The mechanism for like atomic cross-chain swaps is there. Like you could build it and do it. There's no like easy library or something that someone's built to like or interface for someone to easily do that right now. But the underlying mechanism is in the protocol, so somebody could build this thing.
So when we're starting to see some of these projects show up where you can do these atomic swaps, and right now it's very limited and very beta and all of that.
Yeah,
Stellar could be a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's got the necessary primitives to do that stuff. So yeah.
If ICOs become a very hot thing and all of a sudden there's thousands or tens of thousands on your network, do you need a decentralized exchange in some way? And that like say 0x is a great protocol for all that stuff. Would that work with Stellar as well?
We haven't really talked about this, but one of the cool things that Stellar has, one of the unique features is that it has a decentralized exchange built in, which you need for cross-border payments, right? So if somebody has euros and they want to send money to Mexico, the person receives pesos, the euros need to be swapped into pesos, right? So that's built into the network already. So you can trade these tokens for each other, and people can put up offers to buy and sell them. And then when you send a payment, it goes through these offers to do the exchange, right? So
where's the order book? Where's that housed? And
it's in the ledger, so it's basically in this database as well. Because because of the design, this is kind of one of the things that we realize is not only can you do payments, but you can kind of it's just a distributed database, so you can kind of put whatever in there. So there's a lot of flexibility of what you could store in this thing, right? So, and one of the things we store is these orders for making these trades possible. So
how fast is that in terms of, one of the things that on a lot of these decentralized exchanges, it's a nightmare because they're always like lagging and the order books really aren't big enough and there's not enough liquidity there.
Right.
How is that function on your network? Is it really fast to keep up with?
Yeah. I mean, it's not as fast as like NASDAQ, but it's basically the ledger closes every 5 seconds. So if you issue a trade, it'll close, you'll get it in from 3 to 5 seconds, depending on where you put it in that cycle. Again, like because we built this trading in as a primitive, it's always going to be more efficient and easier than doing it on something like Ethereum that they have to build it through scripting, right? So it's going to be just more efficient because it's part of the protocol, right? So yeah, so I think, for a decentralized system, I would be shocked if it's not the fastest one.
Awesome. Where does this go 5 years from now? Where do you really want to see your network? Like, what do you want to get into? Like, you're not doing smart contracts per se today. Is that already kind of like that ship has sailed and enough folks are working on that? Are there other things that you're excited about?
So there's tons of stuff you can do with this technology, right? We would love to see people take the Stellar code and do lots of different things with it. I mean, what we're focusing on is definitely this cross-border payments piece, because I think that's where the most clear need for like something like blockchain exists. It's a huge problem, and payments kind of underpins a lot of the other things that you can ultimately do with this kind of technology. Like for instance, if you wanted to start doing equities or derivatives, like you need payments at some point there, or even like trade finance. Like at some point, payments comes into play, right? So payment seems like kind of like a first building block. So we really want to get the network to the state where it does become this standard for the way you send money around the world, just in the same way that SMTP is a standard for sending messages, right? So, and just people just kind of start to adopt it organically. Like that's where we're trying to get. And kind of I think the way we get there is just build this network of like remittance companies and payment providers. And once that's large enough, it just starts to snowball, and like more people start adding on to it just because it's more and more compelling.
Now, you say building this network of remittance companies. Tell me, how does the average? Can you paint a picture real quick, like how the average consumer would use this? Like, let's say you're in a country, you need to move money cross country, which millions of people have to do, I'm sure, almost every day.
Right.
What does that look like in terms of like functionality? Do they have an app on their phone? Like, how do you envision that playing?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, yeah, it would be cool if like there was like some global Venmo that was actually like backed by the Stellar network, where you'd have different fiat balances and you could send it to anyone and it would just get converted.
That would be amazing.
Ultimately, right? So I think.
Are you making that? Are you making global Venmo? That sounds awesome.
We're working with some people that are going to make one, but yeah, I mean, so there's a lot to do obviously for this ecosystem. So as much as possible, we try to get other people to like contribute and like help out, because we can't do everything. So, but yeah, we're working with people that are making such a thing. But like today, if you want to do it, like for instance, if in Europe, there's a remittance company, they have little kiosks all around Paris. You can like bring them euros. You could say, hey, I want to to send this money to the Philippines. And then in the back end, it's going over the Stellar rail. Like you as a user don't know, but the money gets there, quicker than before and it's cheaper than before. And then it just shows up at someone's either phone or bank account in the Philippines. So it's like super smooth.
Amazing.
Yeah. So.
I love that because there's so many people that take advantage of folks in this space. Like people having to send money cross-border and they charge you these insane, outlandish fees to do so.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes, at least a few of my friends here in San Francisco, they're like trying to get money back to their family to like help them pay for bills. And all of a sudden they get hit with like
Yeah, definitely. That like hurts like the poorest people in these countries.
That's
like,
the worst possible. People take advantage of.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, hopefully, this will help fix all that stuff. So yeah, that's definitely our goal.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What else are you excited about these days? I mean, you must be just like swamped. I always like to end these little chats with either anything that you're excited that you're working on that you want to talk about here at the company, or other projects that you're looking at that you personally think are cool and are tracking.
There's one that I'm super excited about, but I can't talk about yet.
Is it your own or somebody else's?
No, somebody else's.
Okay.
Let's see.
That's horrible tease.
I know that's a horrible tease. Yeah, I was almost like, what's the point of saying this? Yeah. And let's see. For us, we're basically making a nice UI for this decentralized exchange that I mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
The hope is that it'll be as easy to use as like Kraken or Poloniex, or easier because those things are a little hard to use still. And rather than be like the central exchange in the back end, it'll be the Stellar network in the back end.
What was the name of that?
We don't have a name for it.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah.
I read about this. You talked about it though, right?
Yeah. Well, I think we're calling it internally SDEX, like the Stellar Decentralized Exchange, but it's going to have a different name when we eventually launch it.
But that's going to be fiat to fiat exchange, basically.
It'll be it'll be fiat and tokens. So basically, like when these people do their ICOs on Stellar, now they could be exchanged in this thing a little bit easier. I mean, the exchange already exists, but there's just no nice UI for it yet. So
when will that launch?
Hopefully, we'll see, but hopefully in the spring.
Cool.
It will be the MVP of it. So.
What other technologies amaze you? Like when you look out there, you're like, oh, wow, that, Riblox, or I guess it's called Nano. Or are there anything else that you look out there and you're like, wow, those guys are doing some really cool work?
Yeah, I haven't spent enough time looking at what one of the things I'm hoping to do is free up some of my time here so I can do a lot more research on other cryptocurrency projects, because I know that there's lots of cool ideas out there that would be good for us to incorporate or collaborate with in some way. And I just haven't had enough time to read all the papers and see what's real and what's BS, right? So I'm going to try to find some time to do that in the next few months, and then I'll have a better answer for you. But right now, I don't know.
It is such a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much out there. It's just like,
you find yourself staring at the screen at like 4 a.m. You're like, where did the last 10 hours of my life go?
Yeah.
Awesome. So if people want to help out, get involved, where should they, follow your, do you tweet a lot? Like what's the best place to?
I hardly ever tweet. I have a Twitter account, but I just read things. Let's see. I mean, we have a Reddit community that's pretty active. We have a public Slack. If you go slack.stellar.org, you can get in there and chat with us. All the developers hang out there. Yeah, those are probably the best ways, probably.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Talk to you soon.
All right, that is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to sign up for my once-a-month newsletter, I put in all kinds of fun crypto stuff and other life hack-related stuff. Head on over to kevinrose.com. The newsletter is on there. You can sign up and join right about 100,000 other people that are part of that newsletter. And as always, the number one way you can help us out and get better guests on the show and have this recommended to more people is to head on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review, or really any app that you're using. So whatever you're using to listen to this, head on over to whether it's Stitcher or Google Play. If you give us that positive review, we get recommended to more people and we get better guests on the show. So that's it. That's my plug for now. Hope you have a great rest of your day, week, month. Take care.